Now bring this back to yourself. Up to this point, it's been easy to think in abstractions, systems, experiments, descriptions. But you are not separate from any of that. You are an observer, and that matters. It's tempting to imagine yourself standing outside the world, looking in from a safe distance, collecting information without leaving a trace. But there is no such position. Every observation you make involves interaction. Every question you ask is tied to a way of asking it. Every answer you receive depends on the conditions that produced it. There is no view from nowhere. This doesn't mean the world depends on your thoughts. It doesn't mean reality collapses without attention. It means something quieter and more precise. It means that knowledge is not a mirror, it's a relationship. You never encounter the thing itself in isolation. You encounter outcomes of interactions between systems, instruments, environments, and you. Even when observation feels effortless, even when nothing seems to change, you are still participating. Light scatters, energy flows, information is exchanged. The world responds to being engaged with, and this response is not optional. It's built into how observation works. So, objectivity is not about removing yourself entirely. It's about understanding the limits of your involvement. It's about knowing which descriptions apply under which conditions, and not pretending they apply everywhere at once. Once you accept that, the idea of a perfectly detached observer quietly disappears. Not as a loss, but as a refinement. You don't lose access to reality. You gain clarity about how access actually works. At this point, something very human happens. When descriptions refuse to merge, when answers depend on how you ask the question, the instinctive reaction is to look underneath it all. People say, fine, the descriptions don't line up, but surely there's still something really happening down there. Something definite, something complete. They imagine a hidden picture, a mechanism running behind the scenes, a story that exists whether or not we look. This urge is powerful. It feels like common sense. After all, in everyday life, things don't stop existing just because we look away. A chair doesn't become uncertain when you leave the room. A clock keeps ticking, whether you watch it or not. So, we expect the same kind of picture at every scale. But this expectation quietly smuggles in an assumption that reality must be representable in familiar terms, that there must be a single, coherent image that satisfies every possible way of interacting with it. Physics doesn't make that promise. And the trouble starts when we insist that it should. When you demand a picture that works everywhere, you're no longer asking what nature allows. You're asking what you find comfortable. This is where confusion is born. Not because reality is obscure, but because the question reaches beyond what can be meaningfully described. Some concepts work only within certain contexts. Outside those contexts, they don't become mysterious. They simply stop applying. There is no obligation for nature to supply a visual story that survives every possible interaction. Descriptions are tools, powerful ones, precise ones. But like all tools, they have domains where they work and boundaries where they don't. Understanding isn't about forcing those boundaries open. It's about knowing where they are. And once you accept that, the need for a hidden picture begins to loosen its grip. Now consider something that feels even more unsettling. Imagine you have a system in front of you. It doesn't change. You don't touch it. Nothing about it is altered. What you change is the question. You set up one experiment and ask about position. You get a clear, consistent answer. Repeat it, and you get the same result. Then you rearrange the setup. Same system, different question. Now you ask about motion, momentum, change over time. Again, the answers are consistent, reliable, predictable. So far, nothing feels strange. The problem appears when you try to combine the two. You expect that the answers should stack, that position plus motion should give you a fuller picture of the same thing. But they don't. The descriptions refuse to merge. It's not that one is wrong. Both are valid within their own setups. Both describe real outcomes of real interactions. What fails is the assumption that all valid descriptions must belong to a single underlying story. That assumption feels obvious. It feels almost necessary. But physics doesn't require it. What it requires is internal consistency. Within a given context, within a specific way of interacting. Change the interaction, and the context changes. Change the context, and what can be said changes with it. The system hasn't become ambiguous. Your expectations have. This is where many people instinctively push back. They say there must be a deeper description underneath, one that unifies everything. But that demand comes from habit, not necessity. Nature does not promise a single picture that answers every question at once. It only promises that answers make sense within the conditions that produced them. And once you accept that, you stop asking why the descriptions don't add up and start noticing how precisely they hold, each within its own limits. Now take the next step. Looking is one thing. Measuring feels different. Measurement feels deliberate, careful, controlled. You use an instrument, a ruler, a scale, a thermometer. And it's easy to think of the instrument as a messenger. It goes out, checks what's there, and reports back. The world stays the same. Only your knowledge changes. That's how measurement feels. But that picture is just as misleading as the idea of passive observation. Take something simple. A thermometer and a glass of water. The thermometer doesn't read temperature from a distance. It has to exchange energy with the water. It warms up or cools down until both reach the same state. Only then does the number appear. The measurement requires interaction. The system has to change for the measurement to make sense. At everyday scales, that change is small enough to ignore. So we do. But ignoring it doesn't make it disappear. It only works because the disturbance is negligible compared to what you're measuring. Now, shrink the system. At smaller scales, there is no room to hide the interaction. To measure something fundamental, you have to touch it. And touching it means changing it. You don't get to separate finding out from interfering. The act of measurement is part of the event. This isn't because nature is fragile. It's because measurement is physical. Instruments don't float above reality. They are part of it. Every reading you take is the result of a specific interaction, under specific conditions, with specific limits. So measurement is not neutral registration. It is participation with constraints. And once you accept that, the idea of a perfectly objective measurement starts to lose its footing. Not because knowledge becomes impossible, but because it was never detached to begin with. Think about how effortless
Notice how the
seeing
directional
feels.
light
You don't prepare for
emphasizes
it.
the texture,
You don't initiate it.
scattering outward
You just open your
as
eyes,
the surface
and the world
absorbs and
appears.
reflects the illumination.
That ease is misleading. It creates the impression that observation is something you receive, not something you do, as if reality simply flows into you, unchanged. But even at this most ordinary level, that picture doesn't hold. For you to see anything at all, light has to leave the object you're looking at. It has to scatter off its surface, travel through space, and enter your eyes. That alone already breaks the idea of passivity. Something moved, something changed direction, something interacted, and it didn't do that for free. The object you're observing is not isolated from the act of observation. It participates in it. This is easy to miss because nothing dramatic seems to happen. The chair doesn't vanish. The cup doesn't deform. The room doesn't rearrange itself. So it feels like nothing changed. But that feeling is based on scale, not principle. At a deeper level, seeing is a physical process, an exchange, a negotiation. Photons strike a surface. They're absorbed, reflected, scattered. Information about texture, color, shape is encoded in that interaction. What reaches your eyes is not the object itself, but the result of that exchange. So even here, at the most familiar level, observation is already participation. The world doesn't simply present itself to you. It responds to being observed. You don't notice this because the response is stable, predictable, and repeated billions of times a second. But stability doesn't mean neutrality. It just means the interaction has become invisible through familiarity. And once you see that, the idea of observation as passive reception quietly collapses. Try this for a moment. Don't overthink it. Just do it. Look at something near you. Anything will do. A mug, a screen, your own hand. You're observing it right now. You can see it. You know it's there. That feels simple. So simple that it barely feels like a question. Observation feels passive, like the world is just there, fully formed, and you're quietly taking it in. Light reaches your eyes. Your brain registers what's out there. Nothing changes. Nothing interferes. It feels like the cleanest relationship you could have with reality. Just looking, just noticing. But slow that down. What had to happen for that observation to occur? The object didn't send itself to you. Something left it. Something traveled. Something interacted. Light had to scatter. Energy had to move. Information had to cross space. Already, something happened. And the moment something happens, observation stops being passive. We rarely notice this because it feels effortless. Seeing feels automatic. It feels like receiving, not doing. But effortlessness doesn't mean neutrality. It only means the interaction is familiar enough that you've stopped noticing it. So the question isn't whether you're observing something. You clearly are. The question is what observe actually means, once you admit that something had to happen for that observation to exist at all.